Not every night that changes your life begins with candles and wine. But mine did. And I left his house changed, in my throat, in my chest, and somewhere deep I hadn't touched in years. Before we get into it, please, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. This is the kind of story that wraps itself around your ribs. And if you don't share it, someone out there might miss the one story that could have made them believe in love again. He'd seen me twice. Once at the farmer's market, next to a basket of blood oranges I pretended to know how to choose. He was carrying lavender in one hand, a paper bag of ripe tomatoes in the other. Our eyes met briefly, just enough for me to register that his smile didn't come easily, but when it did, it stayed with you. The second time was at the laundromat. Late afternoon. Midweek. The kind of time when no one talks. I watched him fold towels like they were made of glass, like care was his first language. He glanced up once, nodded. Said nothing. The third time, he handed me a note. Not a text. Not a DM. A folded piece of thick cream-colored paper that smelled faintly of something woody and clean. He passed it to me with a look that felt halfway between a dare and a promise. Dinner. Tried it. You bring nothing but your appetite. There. That was it. No address. Just his name, scribbled in handwriting that tilted to the left like it was leaning into me. I didn't expect to say yes. But something about the way he smelled, cinnamon and cedar, like winter warmed by memory, made my mouth say yes before my head caught up. His house was small but thoughtful. Worn hardwood floors. A bookshelf lined with old paperbacks and uneven stacks of vinyl. A window cracked open just enough to let in the sound of wind through the pines. It didn't feel like visiting someone. It felt like being expected. The air smelled like something slow-roasted and tender. Herbs, maybe rosemary, tangled with garlic and lemon, and a kind of warmth that reached into my chest. He didn't ask if I was comfortable. He just handed me a glass of water, touched my shoulder lightly, and said, "Come in." Dinner was roasted chicken, fingerling potatoes, something green the first couldn't name but tasted like it had been grown on purpose. But it wasn't the food that left me undone. It was the way he watched me chew. Not in a performative way, but like he already knew what he wanted next, and the only thing keeping him from it was respect. Or patience. Or both. I came back the next week. The door was already open when I arrived. He greeted me with bare feet and an old linen shirt, sleeves rolled, collar soft from years of wash. Jazz drifted from a record player in the corner, something cool and brassy that made the room feel like a late-night confession. 2 glasses of chilled Riesling waited on the counter. He handed me one without ceremony and said, "I hope you like heat," offering a spoonful of something red and thick and slow-burning. I tasted it. The flavor hit somewhere in my chest before it reached my tongue. "I like what you serve," I said, slower than I meant to. His eyes lingered on me a second longer than they needed to. Just long enough to make me feel like I'd said more than I had. We didn't touch, not really. But he stood closer than was necessary when I complimented the spices. He leaned in to laugh when I wiped sauce from the corner of my mouth and missed. It wasn't flirting. It was study. My throat was dry. Not from the wine. From what? From restraint. From every word I didn't know how to ask with my mouth that my body had already started to whisper. There's a kind of hunger that has nothing to do with food. That's what I felt in his kitchen. And from the way he watched me, I think he felt it too. Then he taught me how to cook. Correction, he stood behind me, arms loosely circled, his chest brushing my back every time I shifted, guiding my hands as we made pasta from scratch. I felt the rise and fall of his breath before I heard it. Felt the warmth of him before I could focus on anything else. The dough was stubborn. It stuck to my fingers, to the countertop, to the moment. His hands hovered over mine, not directing, inviting. He wasn't correcting me, he was making space. Space for mistakes. For breath. For whatever this was becoming. Then his breath found the back of my neck. Slow. Deliberate. Like punctuation. I exhaled without meaning to, the kind of exhale you only give when something you've been holding in finally finds a way out. I spilled a handful of flour across the counter, muttered, "Sorry," and reached for a towel. "You're too careful," he said, voice near my ear. "Let it be messy." My hands paused mid-wipe. "Are we still talking about pasta?" I asked without turning around. He didn't answer, but I felt it. The slight pressure of his hips against mine. The pause in his breath. The exhale that carried my name, even if he didn't say it out loud. He pressed in, just slightly. Just enough. And I didn't turn around. Because I knew that if I did, I wouldn't be able to keep pretending I came here for the food. Later, we sat on the porch, legs stretched out, wine glasses sweating in our hands. The sun had gone down, but the air was still warm. A storm hovered somewhere nearby. You could feel it in your teeth, in the way the trees held their breath. We didn't speak for a while. Then, with no warning, he said, "I watch how your throat moves when you drink." I turned, startled, not because it was strange, but because it was true. That kind of truth you only notice when you've been looking too long. Too closely. "That's specific," I said. He didn't laugh. So I said, "I watch how you bite your bottom lip when you're nervous." That made him smile, barely. We both laughed. Quietly. But it wasn't casual. It was the kind of laugh people give when what they really mean is, "Touch me already." I coughed once. Something caught in my throat. Maybe wine, maybe tension. Maybe words I wasn't ready to say. He tilted his head, leaned in slightly, and whispered with a crooked grin, "Careful, you'll make that throat sore before the night's even started." The glass froze in my hand. My chest went still. I turned to him slowly. "So we're done pretending?" He didn't smile. Didn't tease. Just nodded. And in that small gesture, something shifted. The air changed. The game was over. We had crossed into something else, something fragile and charged and real. Neither of us moved. But suddenly, the space between us felt electric. Like we'd been circling something for weeks. And now it was right here, in the air between our mouths. Waiting. No dinner this time. Just wine. And him. Wearing a soft, worn t-shirt that clung just loosely enough to make you wonder how it would feel between your fingers. Barefoot again. The door already unlocked, like he knew I'd show up. Like there was no longer a need to ask permission to come in. I stepped inside. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how my day was. He kissed my jaw. Then the corner of my mouth. Then nothing. The pause. A question left hanging in breath. We sat on the couch, not touching beyond where our thighs pressed together, skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. The silence felt louder than any music. The air between us was warm, close. Like something had just happened or was about to. He set down his glass, turned to me with a gaze so steady it almost felt like a vow. His voice was low, matter-of-fact. Not nervous. Not eager. Just certain. "I want to give you something," he said. "If you'll let me." I nodded. Not eagerly. Not cautiously. Just if. He reached for my wrist and pulled me up, gently, like I was something he'd unwrapped and wanted to unfold carefully. He didn't lead me far. Just enough. To a space where the light was softer. Where the air moved differently. Where everything after that became music I didn't know how to write down. There was no rush. No script. No countdown. Only warmth. And pressure. And breath shared like communion. The soft press of a thumb at my hip. The gentle way his hand curled behind my neck. The silence that grew louder with every inch closer. And when he touched me, really touched me, it wasn't about lust. It was about recognition. Like finding your own handwriting in someone else's notebook. There were no words. Only mouths that spoke in heat and promise. Only lips that learned how to say yes without ever opening. That night, I forgot where I ended and he began. That night, the sore throat came not from force, but from surrender. From all the things I swallowed before I ever got to say them out loud. The next morning, my voice was a cracked whisper, my body heavy in the best way. I texted him, "So, sore throat." Might sue you for damages. He replied within seconds. You loved every second. Come back for tea. Ginger and honey. I did. The door was open again. He met me at the threshold, kissed the side of my neck like he was apologizing in slow motion. No rush. No shame. Just reverence. Then he whispered against my skin, next time, you'll need more than tea. I smiled. Quite certain. There'll be a next time? I asked more to myself than to him. He pulled back, looked me in the eye, and said, many. And somehow, that single word tasted better than any dessert he'd ever made. Then we had dinner again. But something had shifted. The air between us felt warmer, like the heat had been turned up just a notch too high. Not uncomfortable. Just expectant. Like even the silence was aware of what was coming. He moved around the kitchen like someone going through the motions, but the pot on the stove stayed untouched. The plates were set but empty. The wine was poured, but we hadn't touched it. His gaze was different now. More direct. More settled. Like he'd stopped wondering if this was happening, and started deciding how. I sat across from him at the table, my fingers brushing the stem of my glass, pretending not to notice that he kept looking at my mouth. Still sore? He asked, the corners of his lips curling just slightly. Getting there, I murmured, though the words came out softer than I meant. Not because I was shy, because my throat remembered him. He didn't laugh. He didn't tease. He just reached across the table and took my hand. I know what I'm doing tonight, he said, voice low and steady. I didn't ask what. My body already knew. So did his. There was no food. No clinking of forks. No conversation about weather or novels or how the herbs had grown wild this season. Just him. And me. And skin. And breath. And a rhythm we'd built slowly over months of restraint and eye contact and careful firsts. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that only comes when two people finally stop hiding behind politeness. That night I gave in. Not like a fall. Like a landing. And he did too. There was no rush. No urgency. Just time. And trust. And mouths that had learned, finally, to speak the language of want without hesitation. Afterwards, we lay tangled in his bed, limbs heavy and hearts light. The room smelled like sweat and sage and something holy. He leaned over, kissed the hollow of my throat, tender, slow, and whispered against my skin, "Now that's what I call dinner." I smiled. Not because it was a line. Because it was true. I'd left his house full. But it wasn't food I'd been hungry for. It was him. His closeness. His gaze. His hands. His truth. And now, finally, I'd been fed.